another edition of Talk of the Trinity podcast. I'm Baz Barrett. Will Forrest will be with me from a undisclosed secret location shortly. But due to the games coming thick and fast this week, there's a lot of content to get through. So we're going to be doing things slightly differently during the course of this week at Talk of the Trinity. And instead of our usual review and preview of the weekend's action coming together in one bumper packed episode, we're going to split it up a bit. So we're going to focus today on the review of the Liverpool game, and then we're going to be doing a separate episode previewing Norwich in advance of that game on Tuesday night, and then we'll be looking ahead to Burnley on Saturday at 3 p.m. at Villa Park later on in the week. But before we get there, we have to look back on events at Anfield on Saturday afternoon. Liverpool 1, Villa 0. And of course, all the build-up in the press was about the Gerrard return to Anfield. And in terms of the pre-game, at least, played pretty much exactly how you'd expect, really, from the Liverpool crowd. Very good reaction. Gerrard learnt the mistakes of previous Villa managers. It also managed Liverpool by being respectful, but not going too crazy in front of the home fans at Anfield. So I think he handled that pretty well. But unfortunately, in terms of that, went as planned, as expected, and the game did largely as well. I mean, there's no disgrace, really, in terms of losing to Liverpool, one of the best, if not the best team in the league, and on a hot run of form, hot goal-scoring run of form as well. So, you know, I think the stat was they've scored every game since April against Real Madrid. So if you're looking at a glass half full scenario, keeping them to one goal was positive. And I think the game plan was to try and keep Liverpool down for as long as possible and look to nick a chance on the break. And in that regard, the game was very much dominated by Liverpool in terms of possession and chances. A lot of the talk is going to be about the penalties that were and the penalties that weren't during the course of the game. Will is going to be giving his thoughts on those two incidents in particular. But addressing that elephant in the room first to begin with, evidently it's split opinion amongst Villa fans in terms of the Salah penalty incident for Liverpool as to whether it was a foul or not, or whether it was an example of Mings committing himself where perhaps he didn't have to. I mean, my view is it was soft, I think, as a penalty. It would have been gleefully claimed if it would have been the other way in the other penalty box. But you know, Salah, he was having one of those games that he often is during this season so far. He was in the mood. He had chances in the first half where Martinez largely kept Villa in the game. You have to say there was some last-ditch defending, which may or not have been at least one penalty in the first half. I'm sure Gerrard would say that there wasn't from the Liverpool perspective. But it's one of those penalties, I think, that you know, it never gets given 15, 20 years ago. But unfortunately, we're not in 15 or 20 years ago in terms of that. And you know, I think the modern phrase is Salah's looking for the contact, as it were, and Mings gives him a little. And I think Mings' reaction afterwards, for me, summed up that, you know, he kind of thought that the ref, once he gave it, probably, you know, he was always at risk of that happening. So, you know, of course, you can have players demonstrating when they know that it was a blatant penalty. But yeah, I thought Mings' reaction was telling in that. And as it was soft, you know, it is frustration. And it was, you know, in terms of placement of a penalty, you know, off the inside of the post, and then you're very rarely stopping those as a goalkeeper, even if you go the right way, as Martinez did. And after Liverpool had scored the goal, we threw a bit more attacking flair into it. Danny Ings comes on for a cameo at the end, and you know, the instant Gerrard referring to after the game was that a potential penalty? on Danny Ings, Alisson flying out and kind of maybe catching him with his arm. It's similar for me, to be honest. It would have been soft, I think, if it was a penalty. You can see them given. I'd be interested what would have happened in terms if it had been given, whether VAR would have reversed it, or in this scenario, because it wasn't given on the field, VAR decided it wasn't clear and obvious to overrule it in terms of it being a penalty. I think if it would have been given, I don't think VAR would have overruled it, to be honest, which I think demonstrates in that similar capacity of, soft. Obviously, you want it for your team. If you're looking at it the other way, if that would have been Salah with 5 minutes to go and Martinez rushing out, I think there would have been a lot of anger amongst Villa fans if that had been given as a penalty to Liverpool. So one of those, really. It could have gone both ways. Unfortunately for Villa this week, we are on the wrong side of those decisions. But even though I think if you're looking at the overall flow of the game in terms of possession and chances, you can't argue with the final result of 1-0. It was positive to see in terms of Villa having a game plan to be defensively resolute, trying to frustrate Liverpool, looking to stay in the game as long as possible. And it did largely succeed, really, in terms of that. Villa quite defensively solid. I mean, Negham was getting stuck in, a bit too much stuck in the first half in terms of that wild challenge to go himself a yellow card. But overall, I think in the previews, we were hoping that we'd be able to show some tactical discipline, give Liverpool a game, maybe nick something on the break. And we did two out of those three things. On another day, we could have got a point. On another day, Liverpool could already have scored 3 or 4 potentially by the time that penalty came in. Van Dijk had a great chance in the second half before the goal for Liverpool. Good save by Martinez, but anywhere else in the goal, and I don't think Martinez is getting near that in terms of the header. But in terms of how this is going to affect Villa for the rest of the season, this wasn't really the game that was going to be used as that milestone for the hoped for achievements at the end of the season. The bigger games are to come for Villa in the next couple of weeks, whereby you're playing teams below you who if you want to be mid-table pushing up towards potential European qualification places, you need to be beaten. And anything additional from Liverpool would have been a nice bonus, but it wasn't to be. But, in terms of the overall application and performance, plenty to be positive for, and hopefully it will be a omen in terms of being able to compete against the bigger teams when we play them later on in the season. And speaking of bonus and positivity, that brings me nicely on to Will Forrest, who you'll be hearing from right now with his thoughts on the Liverpool game and how he saw things from his undisclosed secret location. So I'll pass you over to Will.
So you heard Baz letting you know what he thought of the Liverpool result and how getting anything from that game would have been a bonus. Completely agree. You have to beat the teams below you, and around you, you want to push up the league in this league or in any league, and that's what we've got to start doing first. For me, I'm a positive bloke, and I felt that we defended well against Liverpool, especially to start with. We held out tight. Emi Martinez man the match easily. Some of those saves, particularly the low efforts inside his near post from Salah, and the header from Andy Robertson as well, which took that deflection off Cash. They then got the penalty. Salah played for it very well, didn't they? It's a harsh penalty to get, but I'd have wanted it down the other end for the Villa, if I'm being completely honest. Now, should we have had a penalty with Danny Ings? Yeah, I think we should have done. Alisson there has completely wiped him out, and well, things didn't go as planned, really. We didn't get enough shots off, obviously, with none on target, only a few that went wide. But we started to look like we were creating towards the end with the introduction of Emi Buendia, Morgan Sanson as well, and Danny Ings also. They gave a creativity. Gerrard's game plan seemed to be a good game plan, really. You know, he knows the Liverpool fans better than anybody else. Keep them quiet, then be able to attack where you can, and let Liverpool fans get on the team's back. Regrettably, it didn't quite work out for us. I'm not going to blame Tyrone Mings. You know, it was a clever bit of play from Mo Salah. Tyrone Mings has been phenomenal for us. The haters, I'm not interested. You know, you can call me a brown noser if you want to for what I say about him and for bigging him up. That's up to you. I don't really give a shit, to be honest with you. But on the same token, looking back to the attacking side of things, it just wasn't good enough against Liverpool. So we've got to put that right against Norwich. I do think that we see some changes to the starting 11. And we'll go into those in more detail next time. But thank you for listening on Spotify, on Google, on Amazon, on Apple, wherever it is that you've listened. Thank you for watching us on YouTube, if that's where you're watching from. And also thank you for following us on Twitter, because that's probably where you've heard about us, unless you've received a paper aeroplane with @TalkTrinity and the YouTube logo on it, and that's landed in your garden and you thought, well, I might as well have a gander. Anyway, as always, cheers to our, thank you very much. I'm Villa till I die. Up the Villa.